Welcome, everyone. My name is Nikki Lawrence, and I'm a member of the TFN's lecture team, and I'll be your meeting host today. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the land. The Toronto Field Naturalists acknowledge that this land through which we walk has for thousands of years been the traditional land of the Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississauga of the Credit River. Today, it is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to be on this land. Thanks very much to the whole lecture team for organizing today's event. Today we'll be learning about the cormorants on the Leslie Spit and the nesting materials these birds are using. I'll introduce our speaker, Melina Damian, in a few minutes. First, let me share some Zoom tips. Be aware we're recording this event this afternoon. The recording will be available to members only. The lecture itself is pre-recorded, and of course, Melina will join us live at the end for a question and answer series. We'll be muting everybody during the lecture, and it's a good habit to keep yourself muted unless you're about to ask a question during the discussion. We can also turn off our videos, especially if we plan to be moving about. It reduces the noise level and distraction for everybody. After the presentation, please stay to thank our speaker and to join in the discussion. We all crave a lively back and forth. Our speakers especially like to know we've been paying attention and we're interested. I'll also have a few short announcements to share, so stick around. To ask a question, you have a few ways to get noticed, and it probably was going to be Sophia and I, but it probably is now I don't know who and I will be monitoring all the options. If you have your video on, and if we can see your name, then you can just raise your hand like in the old-fashioned way and just keep waving it around. There's also a raise hand feature, which you can find by clicking on participants. You can also type your questions in the chat feature. Okay? Anyway, Melina Damian is an environmental scientist and educator. Melina is Ontario Nature's communications coordinator. She also teaches a course at Centennial College on energy, environment, and sustainable development. She has an MES from York University and a graduate diploma in environmental education, and her research focused on wildlife and plastic pollution. So over to you, Melina.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen now, and then we will get started with the, here we go. Oops. And
hello, everyone. Thank you, Toronto Field Naturalists, for having me today. My name is Melina Damian. I work at Ontario Nature as the communications coordinator, and I also teach a course at Centennial College on energy, environment, and sustainable development. I have a master's in environmental studies from York University and also a diploma in environmental education. And today I'm gonna talk to you about the latest research on cormorants and anthropogenic debris they bring to their nests, which was part of my graduate research. So a little bit about the agenda. Today I'm gonna start with an introduction on plastic pollution. Then I'm gonna go over some of the impacts of plastic pollution on wildlife. And then I'll tell you a bit more about my research study with Dr. Gail Fraser on incorporation of anthropogenic debris in double-crested cormorant nests. And I will close this presentation with a number of solutions.
Helen, the video is muted.
Helen, we can't hear you.
Hundreds of years to degrade in the environment, and that they were hurting animals, so that we should make a pledge and stop using straw. I didn't have any connection to the ocean whatsoever. I'd never seen a turtle. My dad told me about the impacts of plastics on turtles especially, but since he told me that, I felt that it was wrong, that this problem was contaminating the earth. And then when I was young, I came across that photo that you see on the slide on the right of a turtle with a plastic item wrapped around its waist. It's on the internet. I couldn't find the source. I'm also not sure what species it is, but I remember seeing that photo and feeling really sad and feeling that this was a problem that had to stop. So since I was very little, I became very concerned about plastic pollution. And when I went to university and I did my master's, part of my research study actually looked at marine turtles and plastic pollution in Costa Rica. And the other part of my research was based here in Toronto. So this is, again, a topic that I've always been very, very concerned about because I love animals in the first place. And then most recently, there was a problem. There was an event that happened at the beach with my sister. I have two little sisters, and one of them lives in Tenerife, which is the Canary Islands, and there are many beaches, of course, in that island. And I was a couple of years ago walking with her on the beach, and I remember I showed her the microplastics that were being washed up along the shoreline. And we leaned down to the sand and we picked up some of these microplastics, and I told her, look, this is what the ocean is bringing in, even though the beaches didn't look that polluted. And I remember feeling that I becoming even more concerned for both of my sisters' future, because that's not what I had to be concerned about when I was little. I would just go to the beach and enjoy. But now it's a problem that it's gonna affect even more future generations. So this is why I continue to fight against the plastic pollution and to raise awareness. So that's just a little bit about me. And now I'm gonna tell you a little bit about plastic pollution. So approximately 80% of all anthropogenic debris found in the natural environment is plastic. So you may hear me use the word anthropogenic debris and plastic pollution interchangeably because, again, they mean almost the same thing. So I may use these terms interchangeably throughout this presentation. The United Nations recently categorized single-use plastics as one of the world's biggest environmental challenges. Plastics are commonly manufactured from fossil fuels, and depending on the type of polymer, so the chemical that is used to create plastics, they can take from 100 to 1,000 years to degrade in the environment. And some experts even argue that they never completely degrade, so they never completely disappear from the environment. That photo, I took it when I was doing my research in Costa Rica. Again, as you can see, a whole bunch of plastic along the shoreline. It was a beach that was not nearby any industrial sites. It was a touristic site even, so most of it was coming from the ocean. So the problem is affecting ecosystems worldwide. And the difference between microplastics and macroplastics is important to differentiate. So microplastics, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Marine Debris Program, microplastics are those very, very tiny pieces of plastic so smaller than 5 millimeters, and macroplastics are just the bigger items, bigger than 2.5 centimeters, which is about the size of a bottle cap. And that's what my research focused on macroplastics. But microplastics is a whole other topic. It impacts wildlife and the environment to a similar extent, but in a different way. So today I'm going to focus on macroplastics. So I want you to think about these questions for a couple of seconds. So how do you think plastics enter the natural environment? Option A, only people that litter contribute to plastic pollution. Option B, plastic pollution is mainly a result of municipal poor waste management. Or option C, even if we dispose of our waste correctly, there's always a chance of plastics ending up in the natural environment. And if you thought that the right option is option C, that is correct. And that's perhaps one of the messages that I highlight the most when I'm talking about plastic pollution, when I'm making these presentations, because it's so important for us to understand that unfortunately, even if we dispose of our waste correctly, there's always a chance that they will end up in the natural environment. You may have seen in your neighborhood bins, recycling bins or garbage bins like the one you see on the slide. And the problem is that plastics are so lightweight that they can be easily transported via wind or via rain to stormwater drains. And once they're there, they can easily reach a body of water like a river and ultimately a lake and ultimately the ocean. So that's a problem. Even if we recycle, or even if we're consuming plastic and putting it in the bin where it's supposed to go, that doesn't mean it's not gonna end up in the natural environment. The diagram you see on the image on the slide is from a report from the UN Environment Program, and it's a representation of how plastics can leak into the ocean from the moment that raw materials are extracted to the manufacturing process to when we're using them to the disposal stage. There's always a chance. I get a lot of friends or acquaintances that tell me, like, it's okay, I use bottles of plastics, but it's okay, I recycle, I do the right thing. And of course, recycling is the right thing. I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying it doesn't solve the issue. And also the problem with recycling is that it depends a lot on the municipality and the facility of the place where you live. So for instance, in the city of Toronto, coffee cups are not recyclable. I know coffee cups are made of carton, but that's just an example of how something that you would think would be recyclable is not. Also, black plastics are not recyclable because they get mixed up with the conveyor belts. So all of those takeout containers from restaurants that are black, they're all going to the landfill. And yeah, so let's just keep in mind that recycling is not the ultimate solution. And then there was a study in 2017 that looked at all plastics ever produced in the planet. And they found that approximately only 9% of all plastics ever produced have been recycled, and 60% have become trash and are currently accumulating in the natural environment. This is aside from the plastics that are currently being used. So 9% is a very small percentage for plastics that have been recycled. And in Ontario, the rate is similar. So 7 to 8% of plastics are actually recyclable. So again, it's an important message to highlight that recycling alone won't solve plastic pollution. So what do plastics do to wildlife and us? Well, plastics have added chemicals that are added during the manufacturing process to alter the characteristics of the plastics, to make them more malleable, to add color, etc. Plastics also act as they can transport pollutants. And so when plastics enter the natural environment or a body of water specifically, they have similar properties to natural fats. So they act as sponges, absorbing and concentrating the contaminants and toxins from the water column. So say, for example, we find something made of plastic here. I don't know, this plastic case. If this plastic case ends up in the ocean or in a lake, it doesn't already have chemicals in it, but it will absorb the chemicals from the water column and it will transport them wherever it goes, wherever it ends up. And then once plastic starts breaking down into the environment as a result of sunlight and other factors, they can be ingested by wildlife and they can bioaccumulate and biomagnify in the food chain. So bioaccumulation means that the toxins that these plastics have are not easily, once it's ingested by organisms, the organism doesn't get rid of these toxins as easily. They bioaccumulate, especially in the tissues of fish, for example, and then they can biomagnify and move across the food chain until they reach the top of the food chain. And who's at the top of the food chain? Of course, humans, right? So here, that photo, I always say that photo is equally funny and scary, where the person is asking the cashier, hey, can I have a plastic bag, please? And the cashier is telling the person, it's in your beef, it's in your fish, sir. Meaning, he ate it, just open up its stomach, and there you have it. So it's scary, it's funny, but it's, again, scary. There has been so many, there have been various research studies documenting plastic ingestion in fish. And then another consequence is the transport of invasive species. So again, because plastics take so long to break down in the environment, they can transport certain organisms from one ecosystem to another where they were previously absent. And invasive species cause a whole range of ecological consequences in the colonized ecosystems. What else does it do to wildlife? Well, entanglement is one of the main consequences. Entanglement in plastics or other synthetic materials can obstruct the passage of food. It can cause stomach ulcers. It can decrease feeding stimulus because they feel, animals, sometimes when they ingest plastics, they can feel full and they can stop eating, but their stomachs are actually full of debris, not of prey. So they ultimately can die of starvation because they stop eating. It can also affect reproduction success, reduce energy levels when wildlife get entangled in plastics and other materials. This can make them more vulnerable to predators. It can also induce a toxicological response if ingested because of these chemicals that I just mentioned that are part of plastic, and it can ultimately cause death. And this is an issue affecting a wide variety of species worldwide. And it's important to highlight also the issue of the pandemic and plastic pollution, specifically because of disposable masks. So disposable masks are commonly made of plastic like polypropylene, polyethylene, and vinyl, which can take up to 400 years to degrade. So when the pandemic started last year, there were various headlines like the one you see on the screen where conservationists were warning that COVID-19 waste was resulting in an increased pressure to debris pollution in freshwater and marine environments because of all these discarded masks and gloves. And a 2020 study found that approximately 194 billion disposable masks and gloves are being used globally every month as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is an important added pressure to the issue that we should recognize and keep in mind when talking about solutions. So again, apologies for the graphic photo, but I think this is very important to show and to highlight. So now this part of my presentation is going to focus on birds and plastic pollution. So as you can see, the picture on the left is a photo of parents feeding plastics to these young. Plastic pollution impacts birds in a variety of ways. We have an example of plastic ingestion on the right. That's a photo, part of a report from the United Nations Environment Program. And you can see there's a whole range of items in the bird's stomach, unfortunately. And more recently, we've had the issue of birds becoming entangled in coronavirus masks. There was a 2016 study that found that birds, specifically marine species, are attracted to blue, white, and all the other color, I think it was green, but blue and white for sure, and a third color. They were attracted to these colors to build their nest. Colors that could come from natural items or from garbage. And disposable masks are blue and white, so that becomes a problem. There's been various news articles showing how birds have become entangled in masks. There's another one showing a robin that actually died entangled. It was just hanging from a tree. It was really sad to see. So it's a big problem for birds. Now I want to show you a short film from Chris Jordan. Chris Jordan is a visual artist, and he documented plastic pollution and birds in Midway Island. So I want to show it to you because I feel that it's a very important film to watch, and it's not that long. I'm just gonna share my browser and then we'll come back to the main section.
Okay, this is where I'm going to find that and make sure that we get to see it. So. And
Helen, I can put the link in the chat so that it's faster. You can just
okay.
click on it. Yeah.
Do we have the courage to face the realities of our time and allow ourselves to feel deeply enough that it transforms us and our future? Come with me on a journey through the eye of beauty, across an ocean of grief, and beyond.
Okay, I'm going to. Hang on a sec. Um, I just need to find the.
Ellen, would you like me to resume the video? I can do that.
That would be terrific.
Sure.
Yes.
If you just give me the host sharing, I can do that really quickly.
Is this, I'm sorry, who is it?
This is Cameron.
Okay. Let me find.
We're at the 20-minute mark, Cameron, I think.
Right. Okay, sorry.
Sort of like to say, I think everybody should copy down that, oops, here. Copy down that email, not email, the YouTube video address and watch it at home, because it's truly an affecting piece of work. And Chris Jordan also, if you Google Chris Jordan Albatross, he has a much longer movie that you can download and watch from his site.
Cameron, I've made you co-host.
After watching that video, you are feeling the same. You are feeling like, why is this happening? I want to help. I don't want this to happen anymore to birds. And that video is showing how the issue impacts marine birds in an island in the middle of the Pacific, right? And that may feel like that's far away from here, and that's marine species, but unfortunately, again, it impacts a variety of species. In fact, there were 265 bird species that were recorded to be entangled or have ingested synthetic materials between 2014 and 2018. So this is an issue impacting a variety of bird species, and also those who are here at home and who are native to North America. So this is what my master's research study focused on. I worked with Dr. Gail Fraser from York University on the incorporation of anthropogenic debris into double-crested cormorant nests in Toronto, in Tommy Thompson Park. So Tommy Thompson Park was designated an important bird area. That's also where it has one of the largest colonies of double-crested cormorants in North America. And what we did is we assessed 50 ground nests. So cormorants are the photo that you see on the right. And they can nest on tree tops or on the ground. So we assessed 50 ground nests for the presence of debris once the birds had migrated. So they were not in the nesting site. That's me on the left, and what you can see behind me are all the ground nests. So our study objectives were to quantify the frequency and type of debris in cormorant nests, and also to examine if cormorants should be used as indicator species of anthropogenic debris pollution. So ecological indicators are species that can represent the overall health of the environment where they live. So we wanted to assess whether cormorants could indicate, whether the pollution in their nests could indicate the overall or the broader pollution in Lake Ontario, right? So that was one of the questions that we were asking in our research study. Can these birds be used as ecological indicators? There's been a variety of marine bird species that have been used as ecological indicators by looking at the plastics they bring to their nests and also looking at their ingestion. So we wanted to ask the same question for double-crested cormorants. The data collection was really fun. So we went to the site, and what we did is we collected, we took each nest with a shovel. Nests are pretty big. So we took it with a shovel, we took all the materials and crumbled down and extracted all the synthetic materials that we found. So as you can see there, we're taking all the garbage, all the plastic bags and everything we found. We are wearing protective equipment because it's not good to breathe in the guano. So the bird's poop, it's like breathing in cat litter. So that's why we have those respirators and the gloves and everything. And then everything we found, we took it to the lab where materials were sorted and counted. So I washed with a couple of lab helpers. We washed the items, and I had to wash them with soap and water. Then we air dry them, including a dog's poop bag, because it said dog poop bag, and I had to wash them. And so look at all the plastics and like other items that we found. You can see there's even a Dorito bag on the one on the left. And so these were the results. So not surprisingly, all nests sampled contained some form of anthropogenic debris. So all 50 nests had garbage. We retrieved a total of 1,435 items, weighing 13.8 kilograms. And the most commonly found item was plastic, which aligns with the literature. So when these type of studies have been undertaken, most often the most commonly found item is plastic. And as you can see the picture on the screen, it's a photo of all debris found in just one single nest. So one nest had 80 pieces of debris. And you can see there's a variety of garbage to choose from. There were plastic bags. We found a lot of metal. We found a lot of electrical wire too. We found clothing. We found so many straws. We found coffee lids. What else? Glasses, sunglasses, pens, rope, you name it. I think we found it all. We found deflated balloons as well. So that was an eye opener, because before undertaking this research study, I wouldn't think that balloons would contribute to pollution in the environment, especially those that we just let go into the sky and people think they just disappear. They don't. They actually explode and end up in birds' nests. So yes, a whole variety of garbage we found. And so we concluded that cormorants may be using anthropogenic debris because they resemble organic nesting material. So they usually make their nests with just sticks and just natural material like leaves. And we actually found that the metal that was on the nest was very similar to just regular sticks. And actually, Gail and I had to, so if you go, I'm going to go back on my slide. If you see those items at the top, those are metal bars. There were a lot of rusty metal bars. And because they were brown, Gail and I, when we were on the side, we actually had to try to break it because we couldn't tell the difference. We were like, is this metal or is this stick? We couldn't tell the difference unless we would try to bend it or break it. And then we would find, oh no, it's metal. So imagine if we were there paying a lot of attention, doing our field work very carefully. Imagine if we couldn't tell the difference. A bird who's on a rush to build its nest is also not gonna be able to tell the difference. So that may be a reason why they're incorporating debris and man-made debris into their nests. We also found that cormorants should not, so we recommend that they should not be used as ecological indicators at this site. And that is because of the nature of Tommy Thompson Park. So Tommy Thompson Park is a human-made peninsula that was once used as a dumping ground for construction waste. So we believe there's garbage there, there's anthropogenic debris there present that wouldn't necessarily be elsewhere in Lake Ontario. So that's part of our conclusions. However, we do recommend monitoring other colonies at other sites. And we also found that cormorants may select human-made items for color. So cormorants have these beautiful beaks, orange beaks, and beautiful blue eyes. And when they're open, their beaks are bright blue, and they use orange and blue, these colors, during mate interactions. So we believe that they could be trying to find orange or blue items to bring into their nests as a way to enhance their mate choice or mate interactions. Just gonna do a checking the time. Okay, so let's talk about solutions, and let's, I'm almost wrapping up my presentation and I want to end up on a positive note. So you may have heard that the federal government announced last year that Canada is on its path to ban single-use plastics by the end of this year. So this proposal is not to ban all single-use plastics, but only 6 types. And those are plastic grocery bags, plastic straws, plastic sticks, 6-pack rings, plastic cutlery, and takeout containers made from hard to recycle plastics. And this is what I mentioned before. Hard to recycle means they're just not recyclable, like those black containers. So those 6 items are being proposed to be banned by the end of the year. I personally believe this is definitely a step in the right direction. There's been many countries that have already done this, but we need to do it carefully, and we need to make sure that it doesn't translate in another environmental burden. So there's a very interesting article from the CBC. I added a screenshot there that it's a criticism of this ban. And so the title is "Why a Plastic Bag Ban Could Lead to Unintended Environmental Consequences." And what the author is mainly saying is that, well, once we move out of, say, for example, we don't use any more plastic bags, what are we going to do? Are we going to just replace them with paper bags? That's just going to put an added pressure to deforestation, especially in Ontario, where it's already a big environmental issue. So, and I believe this is a very fair criticism. I think that if we phase out plastic just to substitute it by another material, it's not going to solve the problem. We just need to look at, we just need to evaluate society's overconsumption and to reevaluate what are some of the items that we need in our life and what are some of the items that we don't need at all, right? So I always give the example of coffee, especially coffee. Well, coffee, of course, coffee lids, coffee cups, coffee stir sticks, which are one of the items that are going to be banned. I have a cousin in Italy, and he is a manager of a hotel, and he always tells me, well, last time I was there 2 years ago, he told me that people in Italy don't usually take their coffee to go because they're having coffee, drinking coffee has a different meaning. It's more of a social activity, and people take drinking their coffee quite seriously. So people are more used to sitting down and having their coffee. And he told me, when people come in and ask me for a coffee to go, we always tell them, no, why don't you have it here? And we serve them in an actual glass cup. We don't give them any stirring, like disposable stirring sticks or coffee lids or coffee cups. And I thought, ever since he told me that, I thought that is so interesting that cultural factors play a role in sustainable habits, right? So I just wanted to highlight that again, because we want to think what is really going to solve this issue. We need to try to think how we can move to a closed loop instead of consuming and consuming more. I also wanted to share with you some of the habits I follow to decrease my plastic usage. But before I tell you these, I want to highlight that sustainable habits count, but we should all be aware of the personal carbon footprint concept. And this concept was popularized by British Petroleum, one of the largest world's polluters, in 2005, I believe, in a campaign that was aimed to shift responsibility for climate change from corporations to consumers. So the campaign was aimed at blaming us as consumers and looking at, okay, here is your personal carbon footprint. They actually launched a calculator. And I think that it's dangerous and that could be a distraction. I do think that if we focus on individual actions, that may risk not holding corporations accountable, and we need to do both. That's my take on it, at least. We 100% need to hold corporations accountable for their pollution, as well as governments, and we need strong regulations. But I do think personal habits count, and I do think big changes always start small. So here's why I'm gonna tell you what I do at home, which has come a long way. And I think that everyone that knows me has now started doing some of these habits, or not everyone that knows me, but people close to me at least have been able to become aware of this, because I follow these habits always. So first of all, I never drink bottled water. Literally, it has been many years, I think, since I was in second year of university, somewhere in 2014, that I stopped drinking bottled water. But that is because I live in Toronto, and in Toronto, luckily, tap water is safe. So the city of Toronto, if you go to Toronto Public Health and you check how often the water is tested, tap water is tested every 6 hours for so to be sure that it's fit for consumers. So my water is clean. I know some communities don't have access to clean water, but that's why I don't drink bottled water. If I go to Tim Hortons and I want a slushie or I want a iced coffee, something that I know it's gonna come in a plastic cup, I always ask them to give it to me in a paper cup with no lid, no straws, of course. And then at the supermarket, I drink a lot of orange juice, but I always go for the ones that comes in cartons. If it comes in plastic, never buy it. What else? Avocados, I always buy the ones that come without a net, as opposed to the ones that come in the net. If I'm gonna get fruits, I make sure I always try to get the ones that come loose, even though I love strawberries. I eat them, just not as often. I try to eat other fruits that don't come in any wrapped plastic. Eggs, I always buy the ones that come in carton. My shampoo at home is from Lush, but there are other stores that make shampoos like shampoo bars. Some people say they're expensive. They are, but to me, they last a very long time. So definitely worth it. I use a bamboo toothbrush. I don't get plastic bags at the supermarket. What I do to put my garbage in is I save all bags from my bread or from tortillas. I eat a lot of tortillas, and that's how I line my garbage. But again, this is also important to highlight that I do live alone, and that some of these habits, I do it because I can afford it, but I also understand that there is an issue of accessibility in sustainable habits. Like for some families, a couple of cents more buying, the avocados on sale in a net may add up at the end of the month. So I do want to highlight that as well, the issue of privilege and accessibility. But unfortunately, in the end, plastic pollution also impacts those communities who are the most marginalized, who live nearby landfills, for example, or areas with poor waste management. So it's a cycle. But I hope you share some of these habits with me already. Okay, so I'm almost done. This is my last slide, and I wanted to highlight some good news. So the good news with this problem is that plastic pollution, it's a crisis that's understandable in comparison to other environmental issues. So plastic pollution is just garbage, right? Nobody likes garbage. Nobody likes to see it on the street. Nobody likes it. And it's easy to see how it's polluting our environment. In comparison to climate change, for instance, which may be a little bit more abstract if it's not impacting your community in a very direct way. People need to understand greenhouse gases. You don't see it. So just to say that hopefully for all of you who are listening to this talk, sharing this message, it's going to be easy because plastic pollution is understandable. I also wanted to note on the topic of climate change that fighting against plastic pollution, it's the same battle to mitigate climate change. Because again, plastics come from the fossil fuels industry. So this battle is part of a bigger one. That's why it's so important for all of us to be on board with this. I also wanted to highlight that the government of Canada recommends the use of non-medical masks if you're not a healthcare worker or a frontline worker. So this is a screenshot from the government of Canada that says wearing a homemade non-medical mask in the community is recommended for periods of time when it is not possible to consistently maintain a 2-meter physical distance from others. particularly in crowded public settings, such as, and then they list some items. But this is important for us because that means that if I'm not a healthcare worker and I don't use disposable masks, I use my reusable mask all the time, I can be sure that I can opt for a sustainable habit. And I'm also following the guidelines of our public health authorities. So this is important to know. They actually have a section on their website about being sustainable, and they're encouraging people to use reusable masks. So these are good news as well. And then lastly, I wanted to highlight that you can always make your voice be heard and have your say at local and federal government consultations. The city of Toronto launched a consultation, I believe it was 2 years ago already though, about banning single-use plastics. And the federal government also launched consultations which ended on December 9th of last year about how should the federal government go about this banning of single-use plastics. And you can always have your say, submit your comments, and participate. So be sure to follow the federal and provincial governments on social media, to check their websites, check their initiatives, and always have your say, always participate. It's important that your voice is heard. If you Google towards zeroplasticwastecanada.ca, they also have excellent resources for organizations, for educators, for individuals. So I encourage you to find more information about this because I could keep going on and on, but this is my last slide. So there's definitely a lot of work that it needs to be done, but we need more people. We need more people to be part of this battle for the sake of our environment, our birds, and society in general as well. There's a lot to be said about the impacts of plastic pollution on health, but that's a story for another webinar. So thank you so much for listening to this presentation. If you have questions, please feel free to email me at melinadamianflores@gmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter and find me on Instagram. I'm trying to get more into the field of science communication. So on Instagram, I'm always trying to share useful information about plastic pollution. You can also read our research study, which was published in the Journal of Great Lakes Research last year. The title is Incorporation of Anthropogenic Debris in Double-Crested Cormorant Nests in Toronto, Ontario. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and thank you so much for listening.
Hi. Thank you so much, Melina. That was really interesting. And as you were talking, people are writing in things they're doing already, from the wonderful use broken spaghetti strips as stir sticks, which I thought was a great idea, to putting filters for microplastics on their washers, buying the paper strip laundry detergent, tons of ideas, going to your farmer's market. So I'd like to open this up for any questions people might have of Melina. And I'm not good at this, and I can only get the first page so far. So let me just do a look through.
So while people think of questions, yeah, I was reading the comments, and thank you everyone for sharing your ideas. I did want to confirm that coffee cups from Tim Hortons or disposable cups are not recyclable. I'm not sure, maybe I didn't express myself correctly in the presentation, but that's right. They're made of cardboard, but they're not recyclable because they have this liner that can't be recycled, at least in the city of Toronto. And the laundry, it's also very important. There's a lot of microfibers and microplastics that come from our clothes. That's unfortunately not my area of expertise, so I don't want to speak too much about that, but I do think it's a the right direction if you have a filter. So thank you for sharing.
I'd just like to have a question, actually. I know we all probably bike down to Leslie Spit and check out the cormorants. How big is that colony and how many nests are in it?
It's a very good question.
Okay.
I'm not sure how many nests exactly. What I can say is that it's one of the largest colonies in North America. But I don't know an exact number. We only worked in one peninsula, so Peninsula B, and I'm sure they do nests in other areas of the Spit. But I don't have the exact answer to that. Sorry.
Okay. I have a question from Michelle, and it asks, are there any studies on plastics, anthropogenic materials, and other types of nests on the Spit?
You mean with other bird species?
With other bird species or animal dens?
Not that I know of on the Spit. In fact, even for double-crested cormorants, there was only one study published, I think in 1960 something or 1970 something, a very old study that had a similar objective to our study. The literature is broad about this issue with marine bird species, but with species for freshwater ecosystems, there's not a lot of information. So I'm not sure about the Leslie Spit, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is no other study that has been done on that specific issue at the Spit because of the lack of research on this area.
Peter says that they bought 50 surgical masks and tend to reuse them because the virus dies on the mask after a day or two. Somebody was suggesting if you're going to dispose of them, cutting the strings, would that help somewhat in entanglement issues?
That is a good point. And I recently made a publication on Instagram about that same question because it was going on social media, that message of, oh, cut your strings before disposing your masks. I think it's good, yes, if you're going to dispose it, because masks are so lightweight. I'm sure many of you have seen them on the street, just laying on the sidewalks. So they can get blown away from bins very easily. However, I do feel that there's a risk on that message because it may oversimplify the issue of plastic pollution. So people may think, oh, I'm just going to use a mask today, cut the strings, then problem solved. I'm not going to contribute to plastic pollution. Tomorrow I use another mask, I cut the strings, problem solved. So I do think there's a risk of oversimplifying this issue. I think it would be better to use reusable masks. But again, of course, not all of us can use reusable masks, such as frontline workers. So yes and no. it's a yes, mixed answer.
I'm interested in something Gwen Harris actually has asked about catching plastic waste in drainage. Now, I don't know anything about this. Perhaps Gwen could say something?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I found the unmute. This was an article about, which seems to be getting some circulation now. A city in Australia has put netting, oh, you can't see me because I don't have the video on. Anyway, has put netting over the drainage outflow, and then that net catches what's coming through the sewers or the water flow from the streets. Mind you, of course, the next problem is clean that out regularly so that you don't have a huge backup of water into people's basements. But I just wondered if others had heard about this and if it's any idea if it's being considered in Toronto. I put a link there for others to read it.
I thank you for sharing. I have seen that photo. It's great. It's like a net, right? That it catches all this debris coming from the sewage. As far as I know, it hasn't been done in Toronto. There was a study that used break walls it's actually one of our recommendations in the paper, just as a suggestion to look at that study. It's called retaining walls and breakwaters to reduce the amount of plastics entering the lake. So there's a version of it happening here. But again, like you said, Gwen, then the issue of disposing that, it doesn't mean that it goes away. Unfortunately, it has to go to the landfill, and then landfills have a variety of environmental consequences as well, and a large ecological footprint. It is a good solution, but I think it's more like a band-aid solution. I think it's better to tackle it from the root. And it's also important to highlight, I didn't mention it on my presentation, but there is here in Toronto Harbor called Sea-Bean. I believe it's the inventors of this technology are also Australian. So it's like a bin that floats in the and it absorbs the litter somehow. I'm not sure how it like sucks it in. It's like a vacuum that is just floating in the surface. And then when you deploy it, you can collect it after a day or two and then just dispose of the garbage. So that's a good thing that's happening. But again, it happens once the plastics have entered the environment. So I think it's better to try to figure out how can we prevent them from entering the environment in the first place. But yeah,
true, but we can use several techniques and strategies at the same time because we won't be without single use for a while. Okay, thank you very much. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got a question from Ellen. It says she wants to know what your thoughts on groups doing beach cleanup events. Is it a band-aid solution, or you think it's actually something that's practical we can do as concerned citizens?
I think beach cleanups are great. Indeed, we did work with, we used the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanups data. They are an organization that organizes cleanups across Canada, and they are important because of its nature for community science. And the data that they had collected in the spit was the only data available for plastics or garbage present in that park. So without them, our research would have been narrowed. So and that's something also important to explain that I didn't cover in my presentation, because our findings were different from the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanups. That's why we recommend in our study not to use cormorants at the spit as ecological indicators. But to go back to the main question, I do think beach cleanups are a great initiative. They raise awareness. When people participate in it, usually they take photos, they tell their families and friends, and I do think they do contribute to fighting against plastic pollution.
Somebody told me here there's 13,000 nesting pairs in 2016 of cormorants. So 50 nests. Just multiply the amount of garbage you've gotten. Do you know, can you catch us up with where the City of Toronto is at banning single-use plastics? Are they further progressed than the federal government, or they're not? How are they right now?
That's a good question. I did participate in the consultations 2 years ago. I'm not sure why it was done so long ago. I want to believe that it's because they're working with the federal government, but I'm not sure what's the current status of the City of Toronto's regulations. I do know, however, that as for the federal government, there were concerns around whether the pandemic would make the to ban single-use plastics, and it hasn't, which is great. Apparently, the federal government wants to move ahead with this regulation before the end of this year, but I'm not sure about the City of Toronto. But I can get back to you if you email me, and I will.
I have one or two more, and then we can all. Okay. Do you have any idea what might be a good indicator species on I don't know whether Tommy Thompson would be, or basically on single-use plastics?
Yes.
Like if cormorants aren't
do.
interested, is there another creature that is?
Yes, and I'm just looking at my research paper, and to be accurate, I want to read them to you. So what we document in our research paper is that documentation on this type of issue has mainly been done, again, on marine bird species. For instance, we have black-legged kittiwakes, Australasian gannets, northern gannets, kelp gulls, brown bobbies, and double-crested cormorants were used in the Gulf of Maine, but it's a marine site. So yeah, those are some of the bird species examples that have been used as indicators, both for incorporation of anthropogenic debris into their nests, as well as for ingestion.
Yeah.
Because that's also another great, interesting aspect of this problem. We didn't look at ingestion in our research, but it also provides very important information. And for those of you interested, I'm just gonna add the link of our research paper in case you want to read it later. I'm just gonna pop it in the chat, and you can access it more easily.
I would suggest that people look through some of these questions, because there's, I've got one here from Peter that I find really complicated, but it's got a link to something that he feels would be good, that would be helpful to us in looking at fossil companies.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay, I'm sorry. So do check the questions, because there's some interesting questions and there's also some interesting links. Anyway, Melina, thank you so much again. That was really interesting. It makes me want to take another bike ride off to the spit and see. I did see not only the cormorants, but also the herons and egrets there. So it's just such a lovely place for us to go. And I'm glad you've got your young mind thinking about it. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Before you sign off, I've got a few events to add to your calendar. First of all, it's upcoming lectures. On April 11th, there'll be one called Nature, the Who, the What, and the Where. This lecture will explore how ideas about nature are shaped by power and privilege, with a focus on Black and immigrant communities. Our guest speakers will be Jacqueline Scott and Ambika Tanetti. On May 2nd, there's going to be one on Toronto's water, energy, and waste systems. Where does it all come from and where does it all go? With Marika Uda, PhD. And you really have to share your thoughts with us. Our members know a million things about a million different places in Toronto, and TFN would like to share these stories with the world. Please contribute to our Self-Guided Walks project now. If our self-guided walks are news to you, please take a moment to check out the first one, which is on the ecological restoration of the Don. Okay, well, thank you for joining us today, and see you all on April 11th.